Hello, and welcome to Butch's Building Blocks. I'm Butch. We're in my kitchen today again, because I'm looking around thinking I would really like to make a pie today, but I have a paper towel roll, which is not going to help me out. So we don't want to use my coffee ground and my coffee mug. None of these are going to be very good for rolling out pie dough. So, first thing we need to do is a little bit of magic. I need a magic wand. Ha! One magic wand. Built just for special occasions out of nice wood. So we will take the magic wand, roll it around in the air, say the magic words of hocus pocus, and wham! One rolling pin. Look at that. Perfect. This is exactly what I need. A nice, large, round rolling pin, fancy designs on it, everything you'd need for rolling out dough. Say, this was magic, but let's go into my workshop and I'll show you how to make one of these for real. Now it's time to glue up our two pieces that we've cut to the right size. One of the things that you need to do is to put your pieces together to begin with loose. As you can't see any gap here. Okay. If we do something like that, it's still pretty good, but there's a little bit of a gapping down at the end. You need to pick the two faces that will give you the cleanest glue up. Clamps are wonderful things. They will help. But the straighter those two edges are, the better your joint is going to be. So you need to take some time, sanding or whatever, to make sure that these two faces will fit together very nicely. Put on is really determined by how you think. You do need to have enough that the entire surface is covered and moist. The amount of glue you put on is really determined by how you think. You do need to have enough that the entire surface is covered and moist. You need to have enough that when you clamp, you get some squeeze out, and yet you have to remember that all the glue that gets squeezed out is not being used. So it's kind of one of those areas that you have to have enough, but not too much. But I guess you could say, in this case, that too much glue is better than not enough glue. Now that we have our two sides glued up, we'll put them together. I like to take my glue blocks, rub them back and forth a little bit until you can kind of feel it getting sticky in there. This just reduces a little bit of the slippage that you might get while clamping things up. Put your clamp on the end. Center your pressure so that it's squeezing equally. Make sure that these two sides are matching each other, and then do the same thing for your other end. Now that we have this all clamped up, we have a lot of squeeze out here. The best thing to do is to get a wet rag and go in there and clean that up right now. You can wait until it dries and then get a chisel or orbital sander and take it off. But I've always found that if you can get it off where the glue is still wet, it doesn't have time to soak into your workpiece, and it cleans up a lot nicer than anything else. For this project, we are going to want to have two intersecting loops. Decided that they should intersect at the middle of the rolling pin as opposed to any place else. Although if you wanted to off-center them to either side, that's perfectly fine. That's an aesthetic thing, and you can choose to go in either direction. I'm going to make my two cuts, first cut and then the second cut. Both will be at 50 degrees. That will make my loops concentric so that they look the same size in both directions. There's nothing magical about the 50-degree value that I've picked. It just seems to fit the width of the rolling pin. If my rolling pin was longer, I probably would have cut it at about a 60-degree angle. Or if I really wanted to stretch it so that it was long loops, you could go in this direction. The closer and closer you get to 90, the larger your loops are going to be. The closer you get to vertical, you would have just a single solid band going through. Ours are going to be at 50 degrees in this direction. We'll put those in, glue them up, and then come back and cut the second one at 50 degrees. We now have our block cut in half at our 50-degree angle. These are what are referred to as inclined planes. The biggest problem that you're going to have is when you apply pressure on the clamp, this inclined plane will tend to push this one away, or the other way around, depending on how you clamp it. The object is to get these two sides to line up as close to possible as what they were originally. In order to help us along, you need to have some type of flat surface that you know is flat. Carve a groove into it here so that it looks like this. This piece will sit in back. Your insert stock goes into here. This will keep this piece from shifting. We'll put clamps here and clamps here to this solid stock, which will reduce this tremendously, hopefully completely. The other thing we're going to do is we will put and clamp a stop block on this side, and we will clamp a stop block on that side, which will then be secondary reinforcements to keep these pieces from spreading apart. Now I'll put my stop block here. These stop blocks probably will have to be readjusted, but it's a good point to begin with. Making sure that you're pulling this piece up against this block. Clamp it in place nicely. Second is this side here. We are going to put this clamp in but put it in fairly loose. Having a couple deep-throated clamps is always a good thing to have. That way you can get over top of other clamp bars, and we get that in. Now the key is to tighten these slowly. We don't want any single force to be greater than anything else causing these pieces to slip. After 45 minutes, this piece was dried. I unclamped it, took it to the bandsaw, and cut off the excess. Recalculated my center, brought it over to my table saw, and made a cut. You can see the dark line, the gap here. This is the width of my saw blade, which is 1/8 of an inch. Now, when you go to put in the second piece of wood, watch what happens. If you're not paying attention, that piece of wood fits in there, but notice these two pieces now are not aligned. That's because this is a 1/4 of an inch piece of wood. My saw blade is 1/8 of an inch. So as you can see, the offset between this edge and that edge is 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to need to come back and cut another 1/8 of an inch off of this side so that these two pieces line up correctly. This happens with whatever size stock you use. The first cut is simple because you don't have to worry about it. The second cut, whatever the thickness of your stock is how much wood you need to take out so that when you're all said and done, these two are in line with each other. I've now taken off 1/8 of an inch off of this edge to match the full 1/4 of an inch here. And as you can see now, these two pieces are in line, and obviously that is also. We will take 2 pieces of rosewood, glue them onto either end, and then we will take 2 pieces of sacrifice pine, glue them on top of that. The sacrifice pine is here so that when we put our center post in for the lathe, that it does not impact the rosewood. And then we can just cut this away so that we end up with a nice end piece on our rolling pin that does not have any marks from our centers. Okay, so we're ready. We'll glue these on, We'll let them dry again. We'll let this dry overnight due to the forces that will be put onto it when we spin it on the lathe. We don't want any of these glue joints to snap until they've had plenty of time to cure to their highest potential. Piece of wood has had plenty of time for all of the glue joints to dry, to be stable. I've mounted it on our lathe, and we are ready to get turning this baby down to see what we can produce. We now have our rough stock all rounded down. As you can see, intersecting point of 2 concentric circles. I like to make my rolling pin body about 11 inches wide and then 3 1/4 inches for the handholds. So we'll mark 11 inches here. So this will be the main part of the rolling pin, and this will be where you put your hands right there. It That gives you enough room to get some good firm purchase and yet a nice solid barrel so that you can roll things down. Here we are on our fancy roller pin project. As you can see, the circles and the intersections have come out really nice. The grain and the maple going across them is still even. You can even see how these spots cross over here, which means that we did a very good job at gluing it back up again. Here's our rolling pin, all done, all cut off the lathe. You can see a very nice design we carved into it with the inlays, end caps made out of rosewood to give it a little bit of stability, plus make it a little bit cooler. So there we go. Now we're going to take some mineral oil and we're going to coat it, kind of take a look at what it looks like here. And mineral oil really helps those rosewood end caps just shine. Let's get this other side, see what it's going to look like. Welcome back to my kitchen. The last project we were working on was this beautiful fancy rolling pin. It has come out very, very well. We have concentric circles. At this point, you can see where the joints have come together very smoothly. There's no offset anywhere, indicating that we glued it up perfectly well. And then we have our rosewood end caps holding it all together. Very simple project. The only thing you have to be careful of is when you're putting these pieces in so that they line up correctly. I hope you give this project at home a try. You don't necessarily have to use rosewood or wenge. Any light and dark colored wood will be perfectly fine. Hope you've enjoyed this project. If you like what you've seen, why don't you come by and visit me at my website at butchersbuildingblocks.com.